Hey guys, today we are diving into the causes of the Civil War. So, this lecture is entitled The Road to the American Civil War, A Road to the Civil War. And a lot of this we're going to condense down into some readings that we're doing in class or either at home on NTI. So, we won't be covering absolutely everything that we need to know about the road to the Civil War, but you're going to pick up pieces in those readings. You're going to pick up pieces from this lecture and also from your Henrietta, okay? So, the the fire bell in the night of the Missouri Compromise, remember the Missouri Compromise, said that anything below the 3630 line, with anything above the 3630 line, with the exception of Missouri, would become a free state. Anything below would be a slave state. Well, fast forward to the Mexican War, which we talked about in our last unit, period 4, that ended in 1850, around that time period. At the end of the Mexican War, with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we gained a bunch of territory that's below the 3630 line. So it's modern day Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, those places. And we also end up annexing California. And the idea is, what do we do with the Mexican territory? Should it become slave states and we extend slavery out west, or should it not? And there's an idea called popular sovereignty. And this was put forth by Representative Lewis Cass, who was actually going to be a Democratic candidate for president, but he doesn't win. And basically, the idea of popular sovereignty is in the name. Popular means what is popular. We vote. Sovereignty meaning what rules the land. So the people of a territory, with regard to the Constitution, will determine for themselves the status of slavery within their territory. So why would Americans be in favor of voting whether or not a territory should be slave or free? Because it has that idea of democracy, right? Our democratic tradition of self-determination. We decide for ourselves what we want in our country. So popular sovereignty is a pretty popular political idea that gained some ground during this time period. Along with the idea of popular sovereignty, there's a new pseudo anti-slavery party called the Free Soil Party. The Free Soil Party is like a coalition of anti-slavery Whigs and some Democrats and some Liberty Party men. It's just like a hodgepodge group. And their idea is free soil, free speech, free labor, free men. And they're advocating for no new slavery states. Old slavery states can stay slave states, but our new territory, our new soil needs to be free. And that's why they're called the Free Soil Party. They're also a big advocate of federal aid for internal improvements like transportation to connect the West to the East for the most part, and homesteads. So homesteads is government giving away land out West in order to encourage immigration out west or migration out west. And so they want the government to give out free land for settlers. They say it's good for the economy. We'll connect the parts of the nation, economic growth. Okay. So they come about in this 1848 election, and they're not really a big player here. They get 0 states. They didn't really affect the outcome of the election, but what they will affect is they are starting this new political party that will morph and change and emerge into the Republican Party 6 years later that Abraham Lincoln is part of. Okay. So when it comes to California in the Mexican War wants to be, after the Mexican War, it is independent and wants to be annexed. There's an issue in that gold was found, a good issue in that gold was found in 1848 in Sutter's Mill, California. And a bunch of people move out west. They're called prospectors to try and prospect for gold, to try and find them. And we call them the 48ers or the 49ers because it happened in 1848, 1849. We've got masses of adventurers flocking out west to Northern California where this gold was found. Most didn't make profit. Many of them returned home. Those who created services for prospectors and miners, like laundry services and stores and bars, saloons, general stores, those sort of things, made money. And then the people who really made money off of gold were large speculators, people that had capital. They could buy large machinery in order to mine. The surface mining, where you like pan for gold in a river, ran out real quick, and there wasn't enough of that left. So those people that are like, I'm going to hit it big in California, they go out west, and a lot of them end up working for giant mining companies and basically are wage slaves. So A lot of them are single men looking to strike it rich. Many of them are criminals running away from the East. But essentially, California's population, boom, overnight. And in 1849, it paved the way for rapid economic growth and rapid demographic growth in California. And in 1849, they draft a constitution and they apply for statehood. And in their constitution, they exclude slavery and ask Congress to admit them. But here's the thing, part of California is technically underneath that 3630 line, but as a state, they wanted to exclude slavery. So this starts another fire bell in the night moment. Another, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Because if California is admitted as a free state, that throws off the balance in favor of the North in Congress, and the South does not want that. So we have to have another compromise, the Compromise of 1850. So here is the current balance before the Mexican territory is all settled. And we've got an even number of southern slave states and northern free states before California over here is like, knock, 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 I want to be a free state. And that would make 16 free states and 15 slave states, meaning there'd be a majority of people that are anti-slavery in Congress. So what compromise can be made? This is the end of Henry Clay's great compromising skills. This is the end of his great triumphant. This is his third great compromise. He helped with the Missouri Compromise. He helped with the Tariff Compromise. Now we're here with the Compromise of 1850. He's about to die anyway. So he says California should be a free state, but we are going to help the South in some ways that don't have to do with Congress. So California is a free state. The slave trade in D.C. needs to be abolished. And the reason behind that being it doesn't look great when you have foreign dignitaries come to your U.S. Capitol and there's a slave auction down the road. So how are we going to then appease the South, who's going to be upset about California being a free state? That's 3, 4, and 5. Popular sovereignty, the idea that we can vote for slavery or not vote for slavery for the Mexican cession. And the Mexican cession is like that Mexican territory, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Arizona. So those areas will get to vote whether or not they want slave or free. More strict fugitive slave law. So fugitive slave law is when a slave escapes from the South into the North. It is, the law says it's the responsibility of people who find that slave and know that they're a slave to return them back to the South to their master. So a stricter fugitive slave law that could enact fines on people who knowingly allow freed or escaped slaves to live in the North. And then number 5, Texas receives $10 million to give up some of that territory. So if you look at Texas, it looks really funky. This is the part where they cut that off and they make it and they make it like the panhandle of Texas. Okay. And they give that land to the Mexican territory. That was just like a trivial thing. Okay. So who really wins here? Technically, the North kind of gets a better deal here. They get the Senate tipped in favor of the North. It is no longer 50-50. Northern free states have more votes in the Senate. Yes, we get popular sovereignty in New Mexico and Utah, but think about New Mexico and Utah and Arizona. It's a desert. They don't need slaves there. So those people that move out there aren't going to vote for it to be a slave state. It's a desert. They don't have big plantation economy out there, okay? And then that end of the slave trade in D.C., that just looks good for the United States. However, the South does get the fugitive slave law in their favor. And the fugitive slave law becomes the single most important, like, frictional issue between the North and South after the Compromise of 1850. It kind of spurs antagonism towards the South. The Southerners are infuriated if the law is not enacted and not enforced in the North. Some states refuse to accept the fugitive slave law, and they want to nullify it in a sense. And when states try to refuse the fugitive slave law and pass their own laws that go against the fugitive slave law, they call those personal liberty laws. And that's basically saying that we're not going to throw these people in jail and the federal government can't come get them, like that sort of thing. But technically, the fugitive slave law says that there should be fines for aiding and abetting runaway slaves. Sometimes it's carried out and sometimes it's not. And that makes Northerners feel like they are now complicit in slavery if they feel like they will get in trouble if they don't turn in runaway slaves. Whereas before they could just kind of ignore it. All right, here's the Gadsden Purchase. There's a funny video we would have watched in class. Maybe I'll post the link for you guys. But so the Gadsden Purchase is just like a westward expansion thing. The government purchases this little bit from Mexico, this little bit of modern day New Mexico and Arizona. Originally, they were planning to build a continental railroad that would go through here and up into California. Transcontinental railroad. But they ended up not doing that, but we still kept the land. All right, so I told you that there were going to be a few things that we're going to condense down into a reading and either do at home or here in class. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act is one of those things. When I assign you that Kansas-Nebraska Act timeline, I need you to really be good about reading it and understanding what happened in it. It's very condensed. It's very short. It'll tell you all about it. Same for Dred Scott. We're going to be doing that one at home, learning about Dred Scott and the abolitionist movement and how it relates to that, okay? But what we are going to continue and do in here is the Panic of 1857, okay? So because of the 48ers and the 49ers that went to California, and we've got all this gold, there's an influx of California gold. And that throws the economy into like an inflated currency. We also see a world war that we're not involved in, the Crimean War, overstimulating the growth of grain. So our grain is not selling. There's speculation in land and railroads, and that means these banks are lending out money to people that aren't trustworthy. The people default on their loans. The bank doesn't make the money back, and then banks start failing. So the result of the Panic of 1857 is lots of businesses are failing. There's more unemployment. Banks start failing, and there's a call for free land from the government. The government should give people free land so we can send them out west and start stimulating our economy by more farmers and more businesses out west. And that will lead to more slavery issues, right? Because if we have more people migrating out west, are they going to take their slaves? Are they going to establish more states? And are those states going to be slave states or free states? So the Panic of 1857 causes more, slavery or not issues, okay? We also have a political issue that sparks more slavery and sectional debate, and they're called the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And people who aren't even living in Illinois keep their eyes on the Lincoln-Douglas debates because it's such a hot topic when it comes to slavery. So this is 1858, and Abraham Lincoln, who is kind of a nobody at this point, and Stephen Douglas, who is not a nobody, are both running for the Senate seat in Illinois. In Lincoln's nomination speech, he says, "A house divided against itself, a house divided cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure, permanently half slave and half free." So he's saying from the get-go, the issue of this Senate race, the issue in our country is slavery, and we can't avoid it, even though he himself tried to avoid it, because talking about slavery and choosing a side was like political death at the time. It would kill your political career because some people would hate you and some people would love you, but you couldn't be a moderate if you talked about slavery. So Lincoln challenged Douglas to a series of 7 different debates, and basically most of these debates ended up being really centered on the idea of slavery. And the Freeport debate is the most well-known of these 7 debates all throughout Illinois. And in the Freeport debate, Lincoln forces Douglas to answer whether a territory could vote or not vote, could vote to have slavery or not have slavery based on the Dred Scott decision. Because the Dred Scott decision said slaves are property and can be taken anywhere. You can take a suitcase anywhere, and that's property. You should be able to take a slave anywhere. So slave in free states doesn't really exist. So this is the big topic of debate, and Lincoln is saying, Douglas, you have to answer. Do you think slave states or free states can vote yes or no to having slavery? And Douglas answered that territories could refuse to pass laws. They could nullify things protecting slavery, and then they could effectively end slavery in their territory. Okay? So here, although Douglas and others had publicly answered this question before, Douglas was involved in the Kansas-Nebraska Act, this splits a party. The Democratic Party, because of an Illinois Senate race, splits in half of those that believe more like the Dred Scott decision and those that believe, well, popular sovereignty can exist. People can vote yes or no to slavery, okay? So he took a stance on slavery, and it hurt the Democratic Party. Actually, it ends up that Lincoln loses, even though he kind of proves himself in some of these debates. Stephen Douglas just looks better, even though Stephen Douglas caused this fracture, this crack in the Democratic Party. Lincoln loses. However, what it does do is split the Democratic Party and make Lincoln pretty famous. So he will ride that fame on through to create or be part of the newly created Republican Party and get the Republican nomination for the 1860 presidential election, absolutely changing history because he will be elected, and we'll get to that later. All right. Here's a video on John Brown's Harper's Ferry. I will link it for you guys in the assignment, and let's talk a little bit about it. It's just like one of those like people reenacting history kind of videos. Okay. So John Brown's goal, his scheme, is to invade the South secretly with a few followers, many of them are his sons, and lead a slave rebellion. And he wants to give them weapons and establish like slaves revolting against their masters and creating an entirely free black society. So 1859, he kind of goes forth with this scheme. It's called John Brown's Raid on Harper's Ferry. He seizes an arsenal that's like a weapons. They hold weapons there. And in this like big mess where he is caught and they're trapped inside this arsenal, there are 7 people killed, 10 others wounded, and John Brown is caught. Most of his sons have died in this raid, and he is put on trial and found guilty and hung immediately. The reason it didn't work is most slaves were just kind of unaware of his strike. They didn't rise up in rebellion. There were very strict slave codes that if they were to, they would be punished very severely. But the significance of this is that the perspective that people have on John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. The North sees him as a martyr. He died for the cause to end slavery. So abolitionists and free soilers are infuriated that he was put on trial and found guilty and hung so quickly. Even like modern Northerners were like, oh, that doesn't seem right. And then the South kind of reacts, like sees John Brown as an agent of Northern abolitionists, come down here to try and take slaves, an anti-slavery, a big, huge anti-slavery conspiracy. Southern states begin to organize militias to protect against this sort of thing happening again, and putting armed guards outside their arsenals. And essentially, this is the beginning of the Confederate Army, when the South is organizing local militias to protect themselves and protect their slaves from being taken. Those local militias, when the South secedes, will be the first people to sign up for the Confederate Army, okay? And this is a pretty big cause of disunion between the North and the South. All right, so let's take a look at the election of 1860. We have the Democratic Party splits into 2. We have party turmoil. They're splitting over the idea of popular sovereignty and the Dred Scott decision. We have the Republicans nominate Abraham Lincoln. And we have something called the Constitutional Union Party, which their idea is we can't let any part of our country secede. We need to stay together. Union, union, union. And they nominate John Bell. And who wins this one? The big old name, Abraham Lincoln. So Republicans nominate Abraham Lincoln. And here's kind of what Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party's platform is. So it's very broadly based. It's a new party. It's the beginning of the Republican Party. Same Republican Party we have today, just like different beliefs because of time. They believe in non-extension of slavery. So the free soil thing, which Lincoln was a free soiler to begin with. They believe in a protective tariff because they want industrialists to like them and to protect industry in the North. They want they want immigrants to have a little bit more rights, no abridgment of rights, no nativist leanings, and that kind of upsets that like little know-nothing party that's about to go away. They want a railroad that stretches from the North out to the West, called the Pacific Railroad, will eventually become the Transcontinental Railroad. That helps industrialists in the North. They want federal funding for internal improvements. That helps the West, more transportation out West. And they want free homesteads for people moving out West, and that helps farmers, that helps small businesses. You see how their party is very broadly based. They want to grab a lot of these random little people that weren't part of the parties before, the Whigs or the Democratic Party or the Union Party. And now, from here on out in history, Lincoln's election, it becomes the party system of Democrats versus Republicans. And that's kind of one of the significances of the 1860 election beyond just the Civil War. So let's talk about Lincoln's idea of slavery. Southern secessionists are saying that if Lincoln is elected, it'll split the Union and we are seceding. But they just see him as an abolitionist because he was part of the Free Soil Party. And now he's part of this hodgepodge Republican Party, but he wasn't an abolitionist. I love him very much, but he wasn't a perfect man. He issued no statement against slavery. He issued no statement for slavery. So Southerners were like, well, he doesn't say he's for it, so he is against it. And they threatened to secede. And that's exactly what happens. And the first one to go is South Carolina. See ya, bye. So 1 month after the election of Lincoln, and he is only elected with 40% of the vote, by the way. It's the most sectional election in history. He wins all the northern states and 0 electoral votes in the South. So he is able to win 180 electoral votes to 123 without a single vote in the South. That is absolutely insane. It is the most sectionalized our country has ever been. And I'm in 2020 right now, and it's pretty sectionalized, okay? So 1 month after the election of Lincoln, the southern states secede. Actually, 4 days after his election, they call together, South Carolina calls together a legislature, and they call for a special convention in Charleston. Then about a month later, South Carolina unanimously votes to secede from all the other states. And within 6 weeks, other ones join them: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. And then later on in the year, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee will join them in the South. Buchanan, James Buchanan is the president before Lincoln. He just sits there and does nothing. He literally is a lame duck during his lame duck period, and does nothing to try and keep these states together. He's just like, it's going to happen. It's Lincoln's problem, not my problem anymore. And we now get the Confederate States of America. Oh, that won't work. Sorry. Oh, wait, maybe it will. There it goes. So there goes South Carolina. Oh, I thought it was going to work. Yep. Florida, Mississippi. And later on, you see the time going up here. The rest of the states secede slowly as time goes on. And as this continues, this map, maybe we'll look at it in class. The states, they become part of the Confederacy. These middle states will start to secede and become part of the Confederacy, and the war will begin. Okay? So now we have a new country, I say in quotation marks, the Confederate States of America, formed in Montgomery, Alabama. And Jefferson Davis is chosen as president of this provisional government to be located in Richmond, Virginia. And President Buchanan just kind of lets it happen. And so by the time Lincoln is inaugurated, it's over. There is a South, the Confederate States of America, and there is a North, the United States of America. And Jefferson Davis, actually from Kentucky, is the president. And so both presidents of the Confederates and the United States of America are from Kentucky, which is really interesting. On the right, you'll see a monument of Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy. This used to stand in our state capitol, and as of this year, 2020, it was taken out of the state capitol. The statue honors Jefferson Davis and his heritage as a Kentuckian and as the president of the Confederacy. But it's a controversial issue, right? Should we have a giant statue of the president of the Confederate States of America who was pro-slavery and fought a war on that idea? No. That's why they took it out of the Capitol, and they had to have a big old crane to do it. More importantly, in our Capitol, there is a giant statue of Abraham Lincoln. And that one is not being taken out. Oh, all right. And that's all I have for today. Sorry, I didn't know I was done. Yep. So our next lecture will be all about the Civil War and what is going on during the Civil War when it comes to politics and economy. All right. Thank you guys very much.